Hi everyone, I'm Baihan Lin from Columbia University. Today I'm going to share with you our work, Online Learning in Iterative Prisoner Cinema to Mimic Human Behaviors. This is a joint work with Djallel, Bouneffouf, and Guillermo, Cecchi from IBM Research. In short, our work tested different types of online learning algorithms from bandit, contextual bandit to reinforcement learning in the famous setting of iterative prisoner cinema, widely studied in game theory. Here's today's agenda. I will briefly mention the background of the entire setting, and also the prior work that we have accomplished in this line of work, and where this work falls under our research spectrum. I will mention our methodology, our results, and finally, the conclusion that we have found, and also pinpoint some future directions as well. So why do we care about this? Iterative prisoner cinema is not only an important psychological experiment in social setting, but also an important thought experiment in the entire field of game theory. In the iterative prisoner cinema, we usually have two players, or two prisoners in this case, where they can either decide, they are interrogated separately, and in the face of the interrogator, they can either decide to collaborate with their teammate by not admitting to the crime, in which case, they could be, if both of the players chose this option, they will have the optimal solution for themselves. For instance, they cannot walk out free because there is no evidence caught for them, or they could also choose to betray their friends. In that case, they would be saying that, the other one did that. And if their other playmate doesn't do the same, they will be screwed, right? They will be facing a huge penalty where their friend appears to be gaining some temptation that they could be living off. However, if both players, they defect or betray their playmate, they will all face a severe penalty, which no one wants to see if you are a crime maker, right? If you are a criminal. So the payoff table is shown here as the IPD's payoff matrix, where you could receive a penalty, receive a reward or penalty that falls under the R means reward, P means penalty, S means being a sucker, while T means temptation. It usually follows the inequality of T, which is the temptation reward is supposed to be bigger than the reward, which is bigger than the penalty reward and bigger than the sucker reward. And also the two rewards would be bigger than the temptation plus sucker by itself. So you can play it in one round, but in commonly studied manner, usually this can be in an iterative round. So this is important to understand the evolution of cooperative behavior from complex dynamics. So where does that fall? So the broader spectrum of our line of work is to increase the two-way traffic between AI and neuropsychiatry, because we want to form a deeper understanding of the brain mechanisms revealed by how they function and dysfunction that can both help us understand the complexity of the brain and build model for human decision making, but also potentially help us build better AI models. So this all starts from AGI 2017, where we propose different type of bandit algorithm, which is a simplified version of human decision making, basically tries to mimic different type of psychiatric disorders. And then we extend this framework to the reinforcement learning domain in our PRICAI 2019 and AMS 2020 paper, where we model the reward parameters for how the agent interacts with the environment and learns from the history. And then it turns out that they can not only be a good model for human behavior, but also be very useful AI algorithm for AI tasks. Later on, we further extended this framework in our HBAI 2020 paper by extending this not only in the bandit and reinforcement learning, but also in the contextual bandit scenario, where we complete the entire unified framework of human decision-making agents. So our current work tries to extend our existing knowledge about human behavioral agents into the social setting, how they will be interacting with one another by considering different levels of the knowledge available to them. So how does it usually work? So let me first explain the first three classes of online learning agents. The first one is the bandit. In this case, we have Octopus here. So it is an online learning framework that balances the exploration and exploitation trade-off, where you want to explore because when you pull more and more arms, you learn more about each arms, and you would know that, okay, which bandit machine will give you the most likely rewards that is the highest in the long term. But on the other hand, once you are trying things out, you are missing out the current short-term reward because you are not exploiting what you have learned so far. Because maybe you do not have infinite money back, so you want to maximize your outcome or reward in a finite amount of time. So in that case, you want to pull the arm that we know that has a higher reward. So in this case, you are interacting with the environment, but the environment has no states, and you are simply wanting to decide which option is the best, which bandit machine is the one that you want to pull at each current moment. The contextual bandits is a special variant of the multi-arm bandit. In this case, the agent, it takes an action to determine which bandit machine, but in the meanwhile, they also receive an n-dimensional context as a feature vector, and use it along with the rewards of the arms played in the past, the historical information, to decide which arm to play. So this is quite important because the objective of the agent would be that you learn not only how to maximize the reward, but also learn the relationship between the available information given to you, which is the context, and the possibility of the reward, in order to find out the best arm selection policy to maximize the cumulative reward over time. So finally, we have reinforcement learning. The reinforcement learning is a special class of algorithm that deals with the environment, where you can interact with the environment and change the environment. So not only the environment offers you reward feedback as the bandit scenario, your action can change the environment into a different states, where the state will be revealed either fully or partially to the agent for itself to learn better. So basically, the agent has to not only have some sort of notion about what's the context of action I should take, but also have some sort of knowledge about the world potentially around it, and what would be the consequences of my current action, right? Would I be going to different states that can make myself more likely to gain high reward versus low reward? And we also propose a methodology called, in the behavioral cloning domain that can cover all three types of online learning agents. So we call it behavioral cloning with demonstration reward. So it is similar to behavioral cloning, except for the fact that it is not entirely supervised learning anymore, but kind of like you have an expert trajectory of the historical action. In this case, it's the human data, and basically you make the same observation to the current state. In this case, in contextual bandit, it will be the observation will be your context, and then the agent will try to make action given its own policy, either it's bandit or contextual bandit or reinforcement learning. However, once you make the action, you'll receive a reward. But not only you have the current reward, but you also have another reward which quantifies the discrepancy between your selected action with what the expert would have selected in the historical data. So in that case, you have both knowledge, and you can basically have some sort of lambda to switch between two objective functions, and then you can update this policy. So in the outcome, this is kind of like an online learning setting, but your policy is not going to be just maximizing the reward, but also more and more likely to be mimicking the expert policy or the human data that you're feeding as historical data. So does it work, right? So we evaluated both things. The first thing is on a multi-agent tournament, where in this case, we compete different algorithms that belongs to the string algorithm class, and we want to see how are they playing against each other in this social setting. And also we also perform the behavioral cloning using the methodology that we mentioned earlier. When we have access of human subjects, basically we have different subjects, I think over 600 participants, playing the iterated prisoner dilemma, and we basically separate them into like 80 and 20 splits, and then we do 5-fold cross validations on the subjects, basically trying to clone the behaviors of the human decision-making trajectories into different online learning algorithms. We want to see how well they can capture those dynamics. So first, our algorithms tournament. So in this case, we randomly sample. Not randomly sample, we randomly pick an agent instance. Shown here is around, I think, 15 or 20 something algorithm being evaluated here, like the upper confidence bound or the UCB, and Thompson sampling, epsilon greedy, EXP3, and human behavior Thompson sampling are all bandit algorithms. By bandit, I mean purely multi-arm bandit without any context. While the linear UCB, the contextual Thompson sampling or CTS, EXP4, and the split contextual Thompson sampling, which is the human behavior agent that we propose, they are for contextual bandit algorithm that we put in our race. And then we also have 4 reinforcement learning algorithm. The first one is the Q learning algorithm. We also have the double Q learning algorithm, SARSAR, as well as split Q learning, which is the 2-stream human behavior agent that we proposed. And finally, we have 3 handcrafted version, where you can either cooperate in all class, in all rounds, or you can defect in all rounds. And then you can also do tit for tat. Is a popular strategy that is supposed to be offering some sort of optimum or optimality in empirical setting, where you basically mimic what your opponent played in the last round. So then you see that we play it for around 100 rounds or something, and then we keep the memory of 5. The memory here means that in the contextual bandits or the reinforcement learning setting, you have an observation, historical observation. So we put the last 5 rounds as the features or the context or the state that the agent can observe to make his own decision. So that is how we do it. Shown here is the percentage of cooperation that they have. So basically the percentage of choosing to be cooperating versus defecting or betraying your teammate. So we see that we see some interesting pattern here. For instance, when dealing with the cooperative agent, most of the reinforcement learning agent, they learn, and also bandit agent, learns to also cooperate to them, because that is the optimal policy that they should be adopting. But we see that in the contextual bandit class, most of them are choosing a pretty pessimistic view of how their teammates are. For instance, the human by also basically taking advantage of the cooperative agent. But in other cases, we also see that, for instance, in our overall, that is also the case for the reinforcement learning and bandits to learn to be more effective, other than the case where your opponent is a cooperative agent, which is kind of like what we call the collective strategy, meaning that people, when they are playing with iterative prisoner dilemma, they tend to be learning to be more effective at the end of the session. That is because it is the safest place for them to be not screwed up by your teammates. So how does that strategy pays off, right? So we computed the accumulated normalized reward here. We basically over the 100 rounds or something, how likely that they will be getting a very high reward. We see that the cooperated agent, meaning that if you always cooperate, it will have overall a very, very good score when you are dealing with the bandit algorithm or the reinforcement learning algorithm. But it would screwed up. It will be screwed if you are playing against the contextual bandit agent. On the other hand, everyone is having a great time playing against the cooperated agent, because they can always either take advantage of it, or they can choose to share the profit with cooperative agent pretty well. Well, that is not the case for dealing with defect agent on the other hand, which is expected. We also see that overall, when playing against contextual bandit agent, contextual bandits, when playing with contextual bandits agent, will have an overall high score comparing with playing against, say the bandits or reinforcement learning agent, suggesting that among itself, since the knowledge that they are offered is at the same level, they tend to be learning more cooperative strategies than others. And we also see that that is also the case for bandits versus bandit, or reinforcement learning versus reinforcement learning. However, we do see that reinforcement learning overall appears to have a pretty high scoring, high rewards overall when dealing with all components, meaning that the state information can be quite useful in this case. So if we consider the collective reward, right? So how does the teamwork work? So we can sum up the rewards by the two players together to see, well, who is the best team player overall. Obviously, we see that the cooperative agent, as a handcrafted agent, it would be yielding an overall high collective reward. But we also see that, again, when within the algorithm class, it appears to be pretty good team player, and not so much across different tasks. But on the other hand, reinforcement learning, relatively speaking, are pretty good team players as well. So we can also measure the competitions in the pairized agent. So we can compute the differences between the rewards. So basically, are they more competitive than collaborative? So that is the case that we find something interesting, whereas overall, the bandits algorithm seems to be taking a lot of bandits and reinforcement learning algorithm seems to be taking a lot of advantages over the contextual bandit algorithms. While the contextual bandit algorithm is mostly benefiting the other class, while themselves are not so much from that mutual relationships. And this is the case when we try to sum up our across different agents in the same algorithm class. So shown on the left, you have the two agent scenario where basically if you were to randomly pick an agent from the agent pool of that algorithm's class, what will be the percentage of cooperations overall? We see that the bandit algorithm seems to be the least cooperative, while the contextual bandit algorithm appears to be the most cooperative class among the three intelligent agents, online learning agents. But this is not the case so far when we are dealing with three agents. So we could also generalize the two agent iterative prisoners dilemma by having three agent or n agent, where similarly, if one of the agents if all the agents defect, they will be placed in the all defect zone. If all of them cooperate, they will be placed in the all cooperative zone in the payoff matrix. Well, if there is at least one agent being cooperative and one agent being defective, then they will be placed in the other two quadrants in the payoff matrix. So in this case, we find a similar pattern where the contextual bandit appears to be the most cooperative agent, but of course, all of the agents are relatively low on their percentage of cooperation comparing to the two-agent scenario, meaning because now the stakes are higher for them to be like being cooperative and being screwed up, right? Because there are more opponents being played right now. While the relationship between the bandit and reinforcement learning agents appears to be flipped in this case, where at first it appears that the bandit algorithm in the first 2 or 3 rounds decided to be more defective. However, the reinforcement learning agent quickly learns that the defects could be the best strategy to keep him or herself safe while the other opponents are uncontrollable. So that is the flipping relationship. So how does it work out for them, right? So do they become more beneficial or not? So this is the case where we observe that in the two-agent scenario, the reinforcement learning is the best performing agent when playing again when opponent agonistic scenarios like these are being shown, right? So when you do not know who your opponents are, your best would be on the reinforcement learning agent because it learns how best to deal with the scenario best. And that is followed by the handcrafted agent, then the bandit agent. The contextual bandit agent seems to be the worst performing case in here. And then in 3-agent case, this type of trend still persists, where the reinforcement learning agent appears to be the best, the most resilient policy to follow, followed by bandits, then followed by contextual bandits. We can also dive deeper on the specific strategies that each agent is using in this case. Where, for instance, here are some of the example policy of what will be their normalized rewards at each separate rounds and how whether or not, and what is their percentage of corporations on the second row. Right? So you see that they did follow a different strategy where say most of the deep learning, the reinforcement learning strategy appears to be dropping in an exponential fashion, while the contextual bandits strategy appears to be dropping at the first round or so, then staying constant across the entire rounds, which is a weird way for them to deal with the opponents. And we can also see some interesting dynamics in the 3-agent scenario as in the last column. So those are all very good like diagnostic tools that we can further look into. And here comes the behavior cloning with human data. The second here is the percentage of cooperation, where after we train it upon the human data. The human data is shown as the black curve with the gray as its error bar, and we see that most of the agents, especially those are either staying constant, have average after our behavioral cloning strategy, either stay constant or have exponential drops of some sort, or only after a few rounds. So that is what we have been observing, and it appears that the bandit solution appears to be learning more at the rate of the same rate, which is about chance of selecting the cooperation rate, while the contextual bandits algorithm, since they are taking into account of the context, appears to be having a more drastic drop of their cooperation rate, while the reinforcement learning algorithm appears to have a more weird strategy of some sort. We can also compute the errors, the prediction errors between the human data, basically how the human would have picked versus the behavior clone agent would have picked, and we notice the following, where the bandit algorithms appears to be the best performing agent here when we are trying to mimic the human behaviors, followed by the contextual bandits, and then followed by the reinforcement learning algorithm, which appears to be not learning much at all. So what we have learned so far, right? So we explored the full spectrum of online learning agents, the bandits, contextual bandits, and reinforcement learning. And in order to quantitatively study them, we evaluate them on a set of IPD tournaments, which allow us to analyze the dynamics of policies learned by those self-interested, independent, reward-driven agents. Where we observe that the contextual bandit is not performing very well in the agent, which suggests that considering the current situation to make decision is the worst of this kind in this kind of games. So basically, we should either not care about the current situation at all, or carry more situations, but not just the current one, as in the reinforcement learning case. We have also studied the capacity of this algorithm to feed human behaviors. In these preliminary studies, we observed that the bandit algorithm without the context are the best in terms of feeding the human data, which help the hypothesis that humans are not actually considering the context when they are playing the IPD. This kind of discovery proposes new modeling efforts on human studies in the bandit framework, and points to future experimental designs which incorporate those new parametric settings and control conditions. We can also compare them with the clinical data of human subjects with different psychological conditions. So that is one future direction. We can also consider more complicated social dilemma setting like woodpecking or other type of complex gameplay like diplomacy as one of our another future step as well. So thank you. Please feel free to contact us at Baihan Lin at Columbia University if you have any questions, and also test out our method at our GitHub repository. Thank you.